Over the 33 years of our marriage, my wife and I have noticed something. When I'm down, she's up, and when she's down, I'm up. We never intentionally tried to do this or discussed that we should do it. It just naturally happened. And this interesting balance, which is actually kind of a misalignment, has been pretty healthy for our relationship. That's exactly what we're going to talk about in this episode, what we've observed and how we think it helps you have a better relationship with someone else. I'm Larry Cornett, and this is Invincible Life. Well, Nicole is joining me for this episode because we're talking about relationships, and we're going to talk about some examples from our relationship. We were discussing what we wanted to cover for this episode, and she had a great idea to talk about this concept of having balance, but kind of misalignment, which I know is a little bit counterintuitive. But maybe you could kick this off, Nicole, by talking a little bit more about what we mean by this.
Sure. I think when someone does not think the same as you and disagrees with you, that the knee-jerk reaction is to think that that's a problem and that you need to convince them that you are right and they should agree. And I think that early in our relationship, we felt that way. I think that we were always trying to convince the other person that we were right and thought that if we could just, convince, and of course both of us wanted to convince the other that we were right.
Yep.
And it led to a lot of problems. But I think over time we've realized that our differences and our disagreements about the way things should be, the way that we should feel, those differences are actually our strength. Because I think it is easy to get set in one extreme way of thinking, and we've been able to create balance with that.
Yeah, I think definitely has been something in our relationship because we are very different personalities.
Oh, yeah.
We have some stuff where we're a little bit similar. I'd say we're both kind of introverted and kind of shy. But
I think I'm just going to interrupt there, that I think that is true, but that we can take the other side of that because we've found this thing where we're balancing each other.
Yeah,
if one person is, not wanting to go out and interact with people, the other one, and this switches. We're not always in the same role, but the other one can be encouraging. Let's just go. We'll try it for a little bit. So I think that it happens even with that.
Yeah, that's true, because there's a gym that Nicole goes to, and she goes there often. I work out in my home gym, and they'll have an event, and she's like, oh yeah, let's go to the holiday party or whatever they have, right? And then there's times we're out, and I don't know how this happens, but for some reason I'm striking up conversations with complete strangers and talking with them. And she's like, what are you doing?
And I'm running to the corner to hide again.
Yeah. I don't know. Something happens, but you're right. I think we do. Even with that, we kind of play this teeter-totter where one's being quiet and the other one's speaking, and one's being introverted, the other one's being extroverted, and it's not always the same person. That's true. And I think in our relationship, I've tended to be, it's interesting, the cautious one in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
and not as cautious in others. Like I'm cautious, like with the kids, I was always nervous they were going to get hurt on the playground and doing things. And so I was always worried about letting them climb up on stuff and do various things. And I was just so worried they'd get hurt. And you were the counterbalance to that, saying they need to be adventurous. They need to be confident and to grow and to do these things, even if it scares us and scares me. But then there's stuff financially where I haven't been cautious. I'm like, yeah, let's just go for it. Let's just buy this thing or go on this trip. And you're, the word of caution saying, no, it's not maybe best for our budget. Should we really do that? So it's an interesting kind of balance back and forth that we've had over the years. Definitely come out with our children, come out recently. I can't remember if I've talked about that on this podcast, but just this summer, I guess, I discovered quite by accident that I have this aortic aneurysm. Surprise, surprise. Good fun. You can look that up. If you go to the John Ritter Foundation, you can learn more about it. Just doing a coronary calcium scoring test where they look at your heart and see if you have any calcium in it, calcified deposits. And they're like, yay, you have 0, and I'm in my late 50s. So that's good news. They said, but you have an aortic aneurysm. I'm like, and we'll see you later. Bye. So it kind of sent me into a spiral, and we started doing additional testing and some stuff that was good, some stuff recently that looked bad, that showed that I might have blockages and they weren't sure. And so they wanted to do an angiogram, which I just had just last Friday, actually. My wrist is still sore from that. And so I'm going down this path of like, oh no.
Worst case.
Very bad. Worst case. And, like if I have coronary blockages and I need open heart surgery and all this stuff, it's like, I better get my affairs in order. I better get stuff ready. And it's kind of, I'm spiraling down and I'm stressing out the kids. I'm trying to keep it from them, but we don't want them to be in the dark. Our kids are adults now, so they should know. And Nicole provided the counterbalance for that. She was saying, it may not be the worst case. It may have been an imaging error, which now we're starting to think maybe it was. And like she said, initially, I'm like, you aren't taking this seriously. And it kind of hurt my feelings. Like, you're not taking my worries serious. You're not worried. But that wasn't what she was doing. She was trying to balance.
And if I had gone down, then we would both be down there, and it would get worse because it can feed on each other, right? And it could get much, much worse. If one person thinks it's bad, then the other person comes up with more reasons that it's bad. And, then we wouldn't be any good for anybody.
No, exactly. It would, no, we both would have spiraled, and I would have been feeling like, oh no, if she's thinking it's the worst case, and then I'm going to think it's even worse than I thought it was because she's worried. And it wasn't healthy. I needed that balance, even though initially I'm like, why aren't you as worried as I am? And I think that really brought to light this whole concept of finding this balance. And we've had it in other parts of our lives too. I think we were talking about, that we both exercise. So we've been lifting weights, CrossFit, running, trail running, skiing and stuff like that for like, I don't know, it's been since 2008, 2009, I think is when we kind of started on this journey. And there are times when, we want to get up and go for a run on the weekend. It's dark and it's cold and it's the weekend. You want to sleep in. I don't like
being cold.
Yeah. I'm a morning person and Nicole's not. Yeah. And she doesn't like being cold. And so I think it's interesting because she's the one who encouraged me to do CrossFit. And I was the one that said, no, I don't think so. I don't want to do that. And she finally convinced me. And then she also convinced me to do Tough Mudder and kind of pulled me into that. But then on the weekends, I will get up and I make coffee and I'm like, let's go for a run. Once we do it, we're going to be glad we're out there in the forest, right? It's rejuvenating. And so I have to be that counterbalance because she doesn't
I would just
feel
stay
like doing
in bed. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I am always happy afterwards, but it takes a while.
Yeah. And so you have to be that person for whoever your significant other is, whether it's a partner or it's a really close friend, whoever's close in your life. I think the best relationships your partner is that balance and you're that balance for them. Because I think you don't want it to all be one-sided. Like we talked about that, where one person gets to be the Peter Pan forever and never grow up, never have to do anything serious, never have to anything. And the other person always has to be the bad guy. And
the responsible person.
Yeah, be responsible and maintain the budget and always put the brakes on and always say no. And that's no fun. So that's no fun for the person that has to be the grown up all the time. So that's something to be aware of too, is to look for that balance where you're helping them sometimes and they're helping you sometimes. And that's good. That's good. We've seen it in other relationships too, right? So our kids are in their 20s and they've had boyfriends and girlfriends and relationships, and we will observe it where one of their partners is a good balance for them. And they might be stressed or worried about something, and that partner
can calm them.
Yeah. And then there's partners where it wasn't like that.
True.
So I kind of mentioned that in the article. If you go to newsletter.invinciblelife.me, great relationships have this balance. This is issue 111. But I called it people's whose relationships failed because the couple is in sync in all the wrong ways. So when somebody is spiraling and worried and scared, the other person spirals too. Right. Or they pull away and say, I can't deal with this. And they run away from the problem and they don't help. They don't provide that calm balance or anything. And that's not healthy either. Right.
Yeah. I think it's good to remember that not all difference is bad, because I think that's like what people automatically think. Oh, you don't agree with me. And then get upset by that. And it's not a bad thing.
No.
I think we need that more in the world, realizing that, people can have differences of opinion and that can be good. I think that's how growth happens.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think if all of your friends and friendships and all that stuff are all kind of unidimensional and you all agree about everything, it's
boring for one.
Yeah, a little bit boring. You're not going to learn much and you're not going to be exposed to new things or new ideas.
Well, I think we all have ways that we can grow and so, and I think if you're just all the same, there's not as much opportunity for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It is interesting because I see this even in the workplace. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about people as you move up, and I moved up into leadership positions. I was a VP in my last corporate role at Yahoo, and a really unfortunate thing happens when you become an executive. Everybody thinks you're brilliant. Everybody thinks you're funny. Everybody agrees with everything that you say. And you're like, wait a second. I'm not getting any counterbalancing ideas. No one's challenging me. No one's saying, oh, maybe that's not a great idea. Or what about doing this differently, or pushing back, in a healthy way. But no one does that. And so I think, hey, look around you. You can see this in a lot of companies where everybody's kind of saying yes, yes, yes to the boss, and then bad stuff's happening, right? Products suck and companies suck and all kinds of stuff goes down the tube because no one ever said, hey, wait a second. I don't think this is a great idea. I don't think this is, we do this all the time. We're looking at products. We're looking at even commercials or movies and like, didn't anyone say this is bad? Who was in the room when they were like, yeah, this is fantastic. Let's go ahead. And it's just bad. I mean, I'm sure some of you have seen really terrible movies, had really terrible product experiences, and you're like wondering, how did this get through? It's because nobody ever said no.
Well, people need to feel safe to be able to disagree. Yeah. And I think that's an important part of a healthy relationship is feeling safe to disagree.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. I think Google researched this and called it psychological safety. That the most effective teams, the most productive teams, the healthiest teams had psychological safety. That they felt like they could have differences of opinion and push back, and they're respectful. You're not screaming at each other and calling each other names and stuff like that, but you could disagree and have a healthy conversation and kind of work through things and figure out what would be better versus there's groupthink where everybody just says yes to everything, or it's really negative and toxic and everybody's tearing each other down, because you don't want that either. You don't want somebody, when you're worried and depressed, and saying, hey, I'm worried about this, or I'm depressed about my job, and for somebody to say, you're an idiot, you're lazy, you're stupid, that's not going to help either. I think the key to this, and you've talked about this, Nicole, and we've read about it, is to acknowledge that the person is feeling this and experiencing this. You don't deny.
Oh, yeah.
I'm feeling pain. No, you're not.
Sure.
I'm sad. No, you're not. Because that's not good either. I think you have to say, I understand that this might make you feel sad. I get it. You seem really sad. And, how can I help? Maybe I can help you see that there might be a way through this. And I think we've done this for our children. We've definitely done this when they were dealing with stuff at school or work, or just all the challenges that are going on in this kind of modern world, where occasionally they would get really down and negative, like, this is never going to work out. I'm not going to pass this test. I'm going to fail. I'm never going to graduate. I'm not going to get a great job. I'll never be able to survive this move to another state. And we kind of help them talk through it in a compassionate way, and help them see things and kind of work through it and say, well, it could work out this way. Or if that's your worry, what can we do to make sure it doesn't happen?
Sure. And give options of ways forward.
Yeah. I think everybody wants hope. Don't we all want hope? But we also don't want to feel like people think we're stupid for worrying, or that our fears are unfounded, because many times they are. I mean, it could happen. So I think that's important. And I don't know, it's kind of a tricky thing, but we've been noticing this pattern too. It's almost like you do want some commonality with your partner. And so I tell people, it's like, if you have nothing in common, it's going to be really hard to have a relationship. If you have absolutely nothing in common, no common ground, no similar likes, you're probably not going to survive. Your relationship's not going to survive. But if every single thing is in alignment, then there's really no differences. There's nothing that's going to make it interesting or provide kind of that friction that challenges both of you.
Well, I think it's if everything is in alignment, or if one of the partners does not feel that they can express that they are not in alignment.
Right.
There's certainly relationship dynamics or personality types where they do not want to rock the boat or do not want to disagree.
Right. Yeah.
And though something like that can last for a little while, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable to suppress how you're feeling just to agree with another person. And at some point that will collapse, and probably in a massive way. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's hard to look at your relationship objectively and to sometimes make a tough decision where if there is some similarity, it's probably not going to work out, some kinds of similarity. So, for example, if you're both the type of people that get depressed a lot, that's going to be rough, right? If you're both struggling with depression, it's going to be rough. It's going to be hard to not spiral down together. If you're both very anxious and full of anxiety, you're going to feed off each other, and it's probably going to not be a great outcome.
Though I think sometimes people in the beginning feel understood.
Yeah, they feel a bond.
Somebody understands me and is like me.
Yeah. I mean, we have some friends that are addictive personalities. They've struggled with addiction. This happened a long time ago, where a friend of ours had struggled with addiction and come out the other side and recovered and been in recovery and very happy and proud and still are. And then found somebody, through this that was also struggling with addiction, right? And initially, I think that brought them together. I think they had a shared experience, a shared understanding, and I get that. I think that's that thing of, how can someone understand me if they haven't struggled with this too?
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, when one of them lapsed and started spiraling, the other person struggled right along with them, because it's like they were on the edge of becoming re-addicted too. So I think that's a dangerous mix, is to have that. When, I guess I should say, if it's something where you struggle with something. So I'm not saying that two really adventurous people can't get together, or two ambitious people can't get together. But I think on the flip side, the dark patterns in our lives, where we struggle with depression or anxiety or addiction, if you are partnering with someone who has the same dark patterns, that's going to be hard. That's going to be hard, because you're each going to be a trigger for each other. And it's, it becomes a joint spiral where you both kind of go down into depression together. That's a tough thing. I'm not saying this is easy, but you have to think really hard. I know that it may pull you together initially, but in the long run, I think it's going to be really hard to be that counterbalance for each other. Oh, man. Yeah, this is a tough topic. This is a tough topic. I was trying to think of other examples of when we've had this, because I've talked about, kind of my recent health stuff. And I've talked about this before, that I do struggle with depression. I have my whole life. And I've found things that finally helped. I wish I discovered them earlier in my life. But I found that intense exercise really helped me a lot. And I've talked about this many times. The weightlifting, CrossFit, the stuff we were doing helps me a lot. Getting out into nature, we make sure we're going to go do it again tomorrow. Getting out and doing hikes sometimes we go for 5-6 hours or longer. It's crazy. That helps me a lot. And so I've struggled with it. And I think Nicole has been the balance there, and I know it's not easy for her to play that balance when I'm in that, because when you're in it, if any of you listening have struggled with depression, you know what I mean. You get into a really dark place where it seems like there's no hope, that there's no way out, and your brain kind of shuts down. You can't even imagine solutions. You can't imagine a better outcome. And when I was alone and not in the right kind of relationship, or not in a healthy relationship, none of it helped. Nobody helped. And I didn't have the tools that I have now to deal with it. And like I said, I only wish I discovered this when I was younger. But that's definitely been something where Nicole has been the counterbalance for me. Absolutely.
I mean, we talked earlier about roles, how it's, I think, really important that in a partnership that I'll call it a support role, that the support role isn't always one person, because that's too hard. And again, it's one of those things that people can do it for a while, but it can't continue. And I'm sure you remember that I struggled a lot after both of my parents died within a year of each other.
Yeah.
And I could have easily just spiraled down and not, I don't even know, be able to take care of our children, because it's a huge emotional toll. Huge. But you were there helping me through, making sure I got out of bed in the morning. Reminding me that I had children that needed me, and that I couldn't stay in that place. So I think being able to having both people in the partnership, being able to step into that balancing role if someone is in a bad place is invaluable.
I agree. It's it can happen in families where one person
takes on a specific role.
Yeah, they somehow become the peacemaker. And that's not really fair to that person, that they're the peacemaker for the whole family. And when everybody's fighting or disagreeing or not talking to each other, and that happens. It's happened in my extended family, my birth family, right? Where there's been stuff where we haven't talked for years because of stuff that's come up. And people trying to be in the middle of that and always be the peacemaker, that's exhausting. It's really not fair to that person to always have to play that role. And I guess that's part of being a mature adult, is recognizing you don't just get to ride along and let someone else play the grown-up and fix everything and take care of everything, that sometimes you got to be that person. You're going to have to make the effort. You're going to have to get people talking to each other. You're going to have to set up situations where people can get together and kind of hash things out and work through issues. And that's just the way it is. That's part of growing up. And it's not always fun being a grown-up.
Well, I think it's a good idea. I mean, you're talking about family stuff, but to get back to relationship stuff, I think it's a good idea to, engage in some introspection about what your roles are. Are you always the one who is doing something, or is your partner always? And sometimes, especially if you're looking at something that you've been doing and you don't really think it makes you look very good, that's hard to see, But I think that having that introspection and having those, conversations with your partner about, I've noticed that we do this, or that, I'm always the one doing this, or that you're always the one doing this. Having those discussions at a time when things are going well, not when you're in the middle of some disagreement.
Right.
Yeah. And having those discussions starting from a place of mutual love and respect, I think you can create something really beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. You have to work at it. We've talked about this before, is that great relationships, friendships, marriages, they don't just happen. It's not some magical combination of all the right people and attributes, and it just, it happens and it stays magical and great forever. It's just, that's not how life is. Like many things in life, it takes work. It takes a lot of work. And you have to understand and expect that. You have to be willing to put in that work and not be surprised and be like, why isn't this working out? Why isn't it perfect? It's like nothing is. Even the best relationships you see, people are working at it and having open dialogue, having conversations and figuring things out. It's kind of important.
And sometimes having the same conversations over and over because it didn't quite stick the last time. But yeah.
I keep hoping I'll grow up someday, but maybe in my 60s, maybe I'll finally figure out everything and completely grow up. So as always, if you want to listen to other episodes or you want to read some of the articles that aren't necessarily podcast episodes, we do written articles as well. You can go to newsletter.invinciblelife.me, and you can subscribe for free. and stay up to date with that stuff. Well, thanks for joining me today, Nicole. It's been fun having you back on the podcast again.
Thanks.
Until next time, I wish you the best of luck with pursuing the life of your dreams so you can be happier, healthier, and more fulfilled.